Sean on August 30. Huge celebrations to another year of greatness all throughout our anniversary month of August. Manila's hottest radio station is Monster RX93.1. Hey, it's Nikki Porter. Listen, are you into lively conversations about life, love, career, current events, trending topics? Well, I've got intelligent talk heard only on the Monster. Heard on Thursdays. Interesting check.
Heard on Thursdays with Nikki is about to go live online. Catch HOT, the iconic radio show that made Philippine FM radio talk, every Thursday on the Monster.
Streaming video on the Monster Facebook page at RX931, the Monster YouTube channel at RX931, and twitch.tv/Monster RX931.
You heard on Thursdays host, Nikki Porter. Stand by and enjoy the program.
Hey, good evening, Monsters, and welcome to the show that made Philippine FM radio talk, heard on Thursdays only on the Monster. I'm your host this evening, Nikki Porter. I'm sure you know that already. But anyway, diplomacy is the art of telling people to go to hell in such that they ask for directions. That's a quote from Winston Churchill that you can find all over Pinterest, by the way. You don't have to be a world leader or a politician to apply diplomacy in your own life. It's something that can be very useful to even us regular folk. And that's something we can learn from tonight's guest. She's the woman behind Almost Diplomatic, the most popular blog and online presence made by a diplomatic spouse, creating content relevant to expats, diplomats, and travelers all around the world. She's also a freelance journalist, editor, and columnist. She runs the diplomatic column for the Manila Bulletin, while also writing for various print publications in the Philippines and abroad. A journalism graduate of the University of Santo Tomas, she is a millennial journalist who has dabbled in all forms of media, including TV and radio. So heard on Thursdays, let's welcome to the show, Carol Malasig! Yay!
Hello, everyone.
Good evening, Carol.
Good
Thank
evening,
you.
Nikki.
Thank you so much for joining me on Heard on Thursdays tonight.
Thanks.
So, what I absolutely love about your brand, Almost Diplomatic, is because of the almost part. Like, it's not bragging that you are diplomatic. It's kind of like, it's showcasing that there's still imperfection, like it's a work in progress kind of thing. So it's very human and it's very relevant for a lot of us and therefore pretty catchy. So for you, Carol, what's the best definition you've come across to define the word diplomatic?
Wow. Actually, I really like the quote that you shared earlier. It's one of my favorites, and I'm still, a work in progress, trying to get to that point. But yeah, I guess when it comes to diplomacy, I love how it is something that you can use as a government official, a world leader, royalty, but then there's really nothing stopping anyone, diba? Even me, even you, anybody at all, diba? From day-to-day life, na you can use like things from it to improve yourself, improve your life, and just be a better human being.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so but it's for everyone, I feel it. And for the longest time, it's been seen as a world that's so secretive. And now you have all these shows. You have The Diplomat on Netflix. You have all these TV shows, these movies talking about the lives of diplomats, which isn't always super accurate. They make it much more exciting than it is, I feel.
True, yeah.
Yeah, I've been covering foreign ministries and embassies even before I started Almost Diplomatic, even before I married my husband. And I thought, ooh, very spy movie. Not always, it's a lot of paperwork for them. But yeah, I feel like diplomacy is something that is for everybody. And we've moved past that time wherein it was so secretive and it was so I guess during the Cold War, yun yung medyo may spy feeling, diba? But
true.
Yeah, we've moved past it, and it's something that is more for everyone and everyday na rin.
Yeah, because like with the word itself, like diplomatic, people will immediately associate it with someone who's like a politician. And so for us though, it doesn't necessarily have to be in terms of politics, you to work in politics to be diplomatic. And so we'll talk more about how to be more diplomatic in everyday life later on the show. So how much of your life then has changed? Because you were a journalist and then you married a diplomat, and then now has your world done a whole like 180 from becoming a journalist to entering the diplomatic world?
Not really. I wouldn't say that. I think I'm lucky in a way because I am coming from that career that is covering the diplomatic community. So I sort of had this idea what went on. However, yeah, I'm coming from being someone who's from the outside looking in and then just writing about it, reporting about it. And now, like, marrying into it, of course, you're not part of like the decision making or anything, but you're more aware of what are some of the things that are going on behind the scenes, like how hard their jobs can be. They're like the unsung heroes. I'm not just saying that because I married one, but they are like really quiet workers and they work so hard for all the good things that hopefully will come to the country that they represent. Not just Filipino diplomats, but all. Because you're representing your country and you're trying to make agreements and also other deals with other countries for the betterment of your country and your people. So I feel like I have so much more respect for what they do. Now that I have a little bit more insight, I feel like the more I know, the more I can share minsan. Because before, like, you hear something and then as a journalist, you just feel like, oh, I can report about it right away. But then you end up learning later on that, oh, there are so many things that you can't share right away, maybe for later, because you might mess things up. So, but I won't say that it's a complete 180. There have been changes. There's a little bit more pressure on how you carry yourself, how you represent your country. And I feel like that's not just something for diplomatic spouses and for diplomats. Because I feel like even if you're not a government official, if you go out, if you travel, if you live somewhere else as a Filipino, you're also representing the Philippines in one way or another. Because if somebody meets you, for example, a German person meets a Filipino, then if you're the first Filipino that they ever become friends with, then their idea of the Philippines is going to come from you.
That's true.
So, there's also that pressure, but medyo a little more lang because you're attending events na parang it's official.
Yeah. And so, with you entering this, world of diplomats, of world leaders, of these, significant events also that could change the world, maybe, I don't know. Like, what's the day in the life like as the spouse? Because, they make big decisions that affect their countries, but then for the spouse, like, what do you do on the daily when it comes to when you're working abroad, when you move abroad for a time?
So when you move abroad, most of the time spouses cannot work. It depends on which country you end up in, because in some countries the Philippines has an agreement with their government that diplomatic spouses can work. So that means the diplomats of their country can work here when they're here in the Philippines also. But so far, when we were in Kuala Lumpur and in Berlin, in both places, I couldn't work regularly. So I kept my freelancing as a journalist. I would send stories elsewhere. But as a spouse, most of the time, your role is like the support system of your husband or your wife if you're married to a female diplomat. But for your partner, you're the support system. Of course, if you have kids, then also you run the household. It's very... some would say very traditional, but I think what comes into play is more of there are expectations that you host certain events. Sometimes you invite, for example, if your husband is a consul, then the consul of another country, you invite them to your home, and then you parang facilitate relationships also. So for us, a lot of the spouses, we tend to meet up in like social groups. And then what happens is from there, we get to introduce our spouses to each other. Because sometimes, diba, parang you want to build relationships also that don't just start with work and are not just professional kagad. So like before you ask for, let's say, a meeting, diba, maganda you have already this, mas relaxed na atmosphere, or you start with friendship, diba? So it's like networking. So the spouses are usually very good at networking, I have to say.
So have you ever tried to, okay, so you said that sometimes you would be organizing an event, maybe a dinner at your place. So what is that like? Because, okay, how we're picturing, or how I'm picturing like diplomatic spouses is like, yung Stepford Wives, we talked about this off air, and it's like, everything has to be perfect, diba? Yung mga how they prepare dinner or cocktails or something like that. So for you, if you can recall a time or a number of times that you've had to organize a dinner or a particular event at your place, like what is it like? What is the pressure like on your part, since you're kind of like the organizer?
Oh, the pressure is actually pretty huge. So, of course, it would be great if everything will run perfectly. But there has been a time wherein, during my first few years, we would invite some officials at home. Gosh, I don't want to name names.
You don't have to.
You don't remember the dinner. But so funny because one time we had an official come when we were still living in Kuala Lumpur. They were in KL because there were some meetings. And since I've interviewed this official before, I said, oh, maybe you can come over to our place. My husband invited this official. And so I prepared the food because I heard this person likes Malaysian food. I do not cook. Or I try to avoid cooking because I'm not the biggest fan. I feel like it stresses me out. So, but what I'm very good at is plating. So with only 2 hours notice, because their schedule was so sikep and so dikit-dikit. So I didn't know if they were really going to come or not. And I didn't want to buy a lot of food if it was just going to be me and my husband eating them later on. So I was waiting and waiting. And so within this 2 hours, he's like, we're coming. There's going to be 5 of us. So I run to the nearest Malaysian restaurant that we love.
Oh my gosh.
Na parang home cook style, but it was Malaysian food. And so I brought it home, plated it nicely. And I never said that I cooked it. I never said that.
Okay.
I never claimed that I cooked it, but somehow the official thought that I did. And he started telling people, oh, his wife, she cooks the most amazing fish head curry. And I do not cook. I had to go around telling people, I don't cook. I'm so sorry. So at one point, when he was retired and we saw each other again, I said, sir, I just have to tell you, I did not cook that meal. And he was like, oh no, I've been telling everyone you're a great cook. So that's my major flex. I'm very good at plating. So I try to choose my battles, but there is a huge pressure, especially if you're bringing in foreign guests, like non-Filipino guests, because of course you want them to have a good taste of Filipino food naman. So we try to serve Filipino food as much as we can. I remember I've been to the home of one of our ambassadors, and his wife is like my idol, diplomat's wife, because when she hosted that dinner, I was so lucky to be there. And just to see it happen, it's like an orchestra. Like everything was on time, like the help, because of course they were ambassadors, so they also had helpers coming in for that dinner to serve. So they were serving everything like sabay-sabay, and then everything was plated so beautifully. And then so I was asking them after na, oh, who taught you how to do that? And I said, oh, Madam did. So I was like, oh no, pag ako wala akong ituturo. Oh no. So I need to figure that out along the way if ever I'm gonna host like a bigger dinner, because she had a bigger dinner. And yeah, or if I ever want to have people over again, I want it to be a bit better than how I used to. So it's something I guess that you learn along the way. And yeah, I try not to be too hard on myself. So every time I started, I'm like, guys, this is gonna be casual.
That's one way to put it, but at least there's not that much expectation.
And honestly, the good thing is things are starting to become a bit more casual. It's something that I noticed, especially when you were posted in Europe. Things were much simpler also. Sometimes they invite people over to their homes, and it's usually coffee and cake. So it's not like a full meal. But of course, you also depend at where you are. In Asia, you have to, in most Asian countries, you don't want to generalize naman, but at least if you're posted in the Philippines, diba, we like fiesta style or like talagang a full-on.
May lechon,
So, you cater to your audience.
Wow.
But yeah.
So it's, I mean,
pressure.
it's still a learning curve,
Oh,
so
yeah.
especially when it, I guess when it comes to like organizing their end.
Super.
So what's also interesting is like, okay, so we mentioned like, you know, having that reputation of like being a Stepford wife and having like everything perfect and everything. What are some of the myths though that you've had to debunk about being a diplomatic spouse? Because again, a lot of people have their own ideas of what it's like. People might think that, oh, you're just like, are you like freeloading from your spouse, like who's a diplomat or something? But what is the truth like behind like some of these myths that you've heard?
Oh, it's such a huge sacrifice actually. I'm not just talking about myself, because I talk to a lot of women and some men also who join their spouses at post. So I remember when I first decided to move abroad with my husband, because of course there's always that option, right? Now you do LDR. But when I decided, okay, I'll leave my job, that was very difficult for me because I was starting a TV career. My only dream was to become a TV anchor by 30. That was my dream. And I know that if I went with him, I would lose that. Because, you know, I can't, hindi pa uso yung remote work at that time. And so, it was very difficult, and I could only imagine how much harder it is for the spouses who are actually doctors and lawyers.
Yeah.
Because then they cannot practice their career everywhere. So for me, I was lucky to be able to pivot when it comes to my career. But losing your career is a very difficult thing. I had to mourn also. And when I decided na, okay, I'll try to do freelance, that was the only thing that made me feel better about it. There's that, and also people think that it's just like partying, like all those diplomatic receptions, especially the ones that you see in movies. People think, oh, they're just partying, getting drunk. But it's not true. Actually, you shouldn't get drunk because then you don't want to say things that might offend other people.
Right.
And at the same time, you are there to help build relationships and make connections with other people from different countries. So diplomacy is really like networking at the very basic thing of it all when you are interacting with the other diplomat from another country. So kami, as the spouses, we try to keep it light, diba? And sometimes that's how you start a relationship or a good friendship or a good professional relationship with someone. Diba? You start like being friendly, diba?
Right.
You go out for, let's say, tea, or you meet up for lunch, diba? And then later on, if their husband wants to have a meeting with my husband, mas madaling i-arrange. Kasi sometimes they don't get the chance to meet kagad eh.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
diba, when you just cold call someone, parang walang personal touch. So
True.
sometimes the spouses add that personal touch. We have social groups normally. When you're posted abroad, you join a social group, or minsan may mga tinatawag na ASEAN Ladies Foundation. When we were in Berlin, there was a group called Willkommen in Berlin. And it was mostly for diplomatic spouses and women who lived in Berlin, na parang sila yung welcoming committee, and they will organize activities for us so that we get to know each other. And it was very useful. Sobrang useful siya. And while having fun. But at the end of the day, I also don't want to say na it's just hard and parang, oh, my life is so sad because I lost my career. It also opened up opportunities for me in the end. So it's hard, but also it's something that allows you to experience things that you might not have the chance to experience. Like, I never thought that I would live in Malaysia and really get to know the country and the culture. We lived there for 2 years and 10 months. We moved to Berlin for 3.5 years. Very different types of countries.
Right, yeah.
Diba, you have tropical, you have one with 4 seasons, tapos you have one that's a little bit more conservative and one that's very modern. So, diba, to have those different perspectives and to have the luxury of and the opportunity to slow down and really savor the moment in that country, get to know and learn from these people, diba? So, for me, in the end, I realized na, diba, you take the good with the difficult. Diba? Packing and unpacking every few years. Of course, moving is always hard. You leave your family behind. My grandparents are here. My husband's parents are here. So, of course, when we move, there's always that worry, what if something happens? They're getting older.
Right.
My friends' lives have moved on. When I left in 2014, one of my friends had this baby, na bagong panganak, and very cute. And then when I came back, still very cute, but malaki na.
Malaki na, yeah.
And I missed out. Like, I miss out on birthdays and on weddings because you don't always get to come home, diba?
Yeah.
So, there's that sacrifice, but at the same time, you build your life elsewhere and you expand your circle, you expand your network, you meet new friends. So, but at the same time, you know na you're there because of your spouse's work.
Yeah.
And in a way, you try to give back as much as you can because you want, diba, your stay there to be worth it. Spouses also help out in events of the embassy. So
I see.
most of the time, I can't speak for all embassies, but you're not fully employed there for the embassy. It's just your spouse. So you are also there to, but of course, kahit hindi ka fully employed, you try to help out when there's an event.
True.
And you invite the other spouses if they want to showcase the culture. Kasi that's also a good way to improve the image of a country, diba? Or to showcase the culture through the spouses. Kasi of course we talk, we share our culture with each other, diba? So that's a form of soft power also. So yeah, there's a lot of things that comes into play. But at the same, what I can really say is that it's fun, it's very enriching, but it's not always easy.
When you get posted abroad, you can't fly back home unless it's for, it's still like for your spouse's work.
So you can, when you go, and if you go on vacation at home, then that's on your expense. Of course. So it's paid na you go, and then when you come home finally, diba? Or when they move you.
Yeah.
Pero if you go on vacation, then that's on you. And I think that's fair. Kasi of course, same then with people who are working at home, diba? So, but yeah, so I rarely get to go home when we were in Berlin because it's farther.
Yeah.
But my mom lives in Amsterdam. I'm half Danish. My dad lives in Denmark. So sometimes I would go visit them there. But for 3.5 years, I did not see Manila. It was easier to go home when I was in KL.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
But Berlin was, and the flight was really long. So we savored our time there with my side of the family. So now that we're
good.
here, bumabawi kami with my husband's side of the family and my grandparents were here.
That's awesome. At least you're able to find ways to still connect. Like if you are posted in a particular place, okay, what can we do so that we don't feel like we're out of touch with family and everything.
And you have to stay Filipino. I think that's something I'm also
Yeah,
very
that's a good
passionate
point, yeah.
about because Filipinos tend to absorb. We as a society, we're so good at absorbing things.
True,
right?
very true.
But it shouldn't be at the expense of our own culture and our own, let's say, language, diba? So even if I wasn't able to go home, I try to make sure that I'm updated, like what's going on in Manila. Not just with news, but also like, okay, ano na bang uso back home? Because sometimes, diba, you have diplomatic spouses or yung counterparts ng spouse mo would ask about, let's say, we want to go to the Philippines for a vacation. Where would you recommend?
Yeah.
Ganyan. So it's nice to have recommendations. And,
Right.
yeah, one pet peeve of mine is that when I hear people say na, skip Manila. And then it's coming from Filipinos, diba? It's so sad. So I'm always trying to say, no, you have to see Manila before you go to the islands because that's how you also understand who we are as a people.
Right.
And there's so much history here. So while I'm here, that's one thing I really try. I try to post content. I try to write about Manila and the really good things. I mean, the grit. Of course, it's not perfect, right? But there's beauty in the grit. And I feel like there's so much history there. So many things we could learn about our own selves.
That's true.
I've been trying to play tourist while we're here. And I feel like rediscovering my own city has been so helpful in really making sure that I continue loving my own country, diba?
Yeah, that's and I actually did notice that with your content on social media, particularly on Instagram, because you post photos like arts and crafts, I guess, like that are locally made, and so it's really nice to see because it's not just that your content as almost diplomatic, but it's also uplifting the culture that we have, what we can actually offer also. And so that you as a diplomatic spouse, like when other diplomatic spouses go and see it, it's like, I love those earrings. Where did you get it? Parang
I try to make budol.
Yeah,
I was at here. ear. So you should buy these earrings so that when you go, you have something Filipino. Yeah, and I think, it doesn't take much to share it with others and to convince them to actually love our stuff because they're always so beautiful. I don't even feel the pressure to to buy like high-end designer. Like, when you go to France, when you move to Europe, a lot of times, Louis Vuitton is here, Hermes and everything. But sometimes I'm thinking about, but I like my Filipino stuff. And I feel like I have more to say when we go to a diplomatic event and then I'm carrying a Zara Juan bag.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, that's so cute. Where's it from? Is it from the Philippines? Or earrings that were designed by a Filipino designer. I really love the ones that Miriam Batara makes. Sobrang ganda. And so I'm always just like trying to wear them whenever I can. Not that wearing designers from other countries is bad. Of course, it's also okay. But a lot of times, I find, oh my God, I like this one. Or I'm so drawn to the ones that we are making here. And I hope that more people, not just in the Philippines, but everywhere else, that they'll see how beautiful our stuff is.
Yeah.
The ones that we make, our modern Filipiniana. I'm pushing more people to wear the terno every day. Well, not the gown, but like yung casual style.
True.
Because I feel like we should be more in touch with our own culture. It's something I really try to advocate for.
Yeah, I've actually noticed like there's a lot of, well, I don't know if there's a push right now, but then whenever I see like the terno nga, it's like, and in different styles, it's like, I would love to wear this like as an everyday kind of thing because like, that is uniquely Filipino and then now we're applying it to something more modern also.
It's so elegant.
And it adds like, more to our identity as Filipinos. And so, but I love also that, you wear Filipino made like earrings or jewelry or accessories because like you're also like you're representing the country, diba? So it's like it's just perfect na parang like you find these beautiful things about the Philippines and you carry it with you.
Thank you. I'm happy to do that. I mean, the weaves are also very beautiful.
Yes.
But yeah, I try to never leave home without anything Filipino. That got easy kasi I got bangles from Natalia Lagdame. I never remove these. So, pag may nakakapansin, and every time I post like a video, either on TikTok or Instagram, minsan may makakapansin na, where are your bangles from? I was like, Natalia Lagdame. And you can also get like other bangles from, kasi this is, I think, modeled from the Tiboli tribe. And then we also have other tribes, diba, that make different types of jewelry. And we have people here in Manila now who are trying to work with them and bring that to the city. So it's easier to wear something, diba? Something Filipino every day.
Yeah.
So that's my rule.
And it's a great rule to have. Now, it's been a decade thereabouts since you've been like a diplomatic spouse?
Almost.
Almost? Almost a decade?
Yeah.
So do you still feel pressure when you attend like diplomatic events? Like, because I'm sure there are protocols when you meet particular, diplomats or world leaders even. So can you recall a time probably when you felt a little bit more pressure than usual because there's maybe a specific protocol that you have to abide by?
Yes. There were several. But funny enough, kasi when I started being a diplomatic spouse, I'm coming from the perspective of a journalist who covered the embassies.
Okay.
So you know how it is when you're media, right? Na parang you're there, but rules don't apply to you.
Yeah, yeah.
And that
you're
was,
fly on the wall, parang.
I'm just here, or like I'm having fun, drinks, yay, and I'm just watching you. So those rules didn't apply to me. And when I married my husband and I would attend certain events, I had little mistakes na people think that she's doing so well, she probably never had mistakes. No, I had, and some of them were, I got lucky that they didn't blow up, but I mean they could have. So, but you learn along the way, and every now and then I still feel pressured because you know when you are going to a diplomatic event na you are tied to, let's say, of course your country, but also like if I do something embarrassing, that my husband will also be embarrassed, my country will be embarrassed. So there's always that pressure. I guess the last time would have to be, there was a time when we visited the Palace in KL and the Schloss Bellevue in Germany. And those were two separate occasions. And then another time when we met Angela Merkel.
Wow.
And of course, when we visited the Chancery then in Germany, so they would take us on a tour, and then we had the chance to take photos with Angela Merkel. And I was just so, I guess more than pressure, it was like the starstruck talaga ako. Because I would write reports lang then about her when I was working as a TV reporter here. Not that Germany is like big news at that time, but there were times when they would be a part of the news cycle then. So she's somebody that I've admired from afar, and then I had the chance to be like in one photo. Of course, ang laki ng photo. Like I was this small, she was like right there in the middle. But just to be in the same room and to hear stories. When we were in Kuala Lumpur, the ambassador of Cambodia was the sister of the king.
Okay.
So there were times when I would joke to my husband, "Oh my God, I'm beside royalty and I'm feeling so kabado." But she was so chill. It's not like she needed protocol because she's a princess. She was very chill about it. One time I met the wife of like parang second prince back in Malaysia. We were seated next to each other in a fashion show, and I was like, "Don't say anything." So it's more of that. But I guess as time went by, I learned how to stick to certain topics. Of course, no politics, no religion. Diba? People say a lot of negative things about small talk nowadays, but it's an art form, I have to say. It really opens up conversation to go into something deeper, diba? Kasi parang ang weird naman, diba? I come up to somebody and like, what's the meaning of life for you? Awkward. So
Right.
I try to make small talk something more interesting. Of course, sometimes you start with the weather because it's inevitable. In Europe, that's normally how people start talking.
Okay.
You're all complaining about the weather. But from there, that's when you open up to other topics, diba? So, I think I've gotten better. Not saying I'm perfect. I feel like I'll always be almost diplomatic until the very end of my life. Even after my husband retires, or sometimes I get people asking me, like, do you ever think of taking the exam? Like, no.
Oh my
This
God.
is already hard enough. Because their work is really so tremendously important and difficult, and they're behind the scenes. And so I feel like this is already too difficult for me. Hindi na kaya yun. But just almost diplomatic until the end.
Okay.
You keep
Good to
learning
know.
eh.
Yeah.
You feel like you know things already, and then biglang, oh, I didn't. There was one time na nauna akong kumain at an event that the Philippine Embassy was hosting.
Oh no.
Because I was so hungry.
Oh no.
And they opened the buffet, and then hindi ko to malilimutan. That was so so embarrassing for me. We were at the residence of the Philippine ambassador. And super bait ni ambassador and my madam, the wife. And so, of course, after the speeches, because there was a performance also, and then after that, they were like, oh, the buffet is open. And you know naman, like, diba, in our societies, similar with Malaysia, ayaw mong mauna sa buffet. Normally.
Right.
I never had
That's
that problem. Kasi I've always been that channel. Okay, game.
Yeah.
Parang, I grew up as a confident kid. So, in a way, parang, as long as I feel like I'm not doing anything wrong, I'd go. But it was so funny because after that, nobody was going for the buffet. I said, okay, guys, let's go. And then I went and I took my food and started eating. The event ends, and then this is something I truly appreciate. My madam, she came up to me and said, Carol, I want to tell you something. Not in a very negative way. I want to tell you something. Like, yes po. And then she goes like, okay, when we're the ones hosting the event, when it's our country, we let the guests eat first. I'm like, oo nga, no.
Oh my God.
So I try to, and that's something that I'll always remember. So now, never na ako nauuna sa buffet. Especially if tayo yung host.
Yeah, and I think it was very diplomatic of her to approach you in that way, like, pulling you aside instead of like making a scene.
At the end, because if somebody did it, let's say right then and there, pulled me aside during the event, it would make me feel awkward. Remember? And I would be like, oh, I don't know how to react na.
Yeah.
It will probably change my mood during the event.
That's true.
So I noticed how she did it, and I was like, that's actually a very good way of doing things. I used to be the type of person who's like, if something annoys me, if I notice something bad, I just say it without thinking. Because I feel like, oh, honesty is the best policy, and it is. But it's also how you say it, when you say it.
And the timing,
The timing is also very important. So it's something I appreciated very much. And I try to incorporate that whenever I need to talk to someone about something that might be perceived as negative. So I didn't feel like napagalitan ako. I felt that that was a learning moment for me.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So when you started like almost diplomatic, then what was the purpose behind it? Because you are, well, partially like there's like the keep it classy portions that you have on your social media, but like ultimately when you started out, it was a blog. So what was the purpose of it when you started it, and what prompted you to actually do it?
Okay, so when we moved to KL, that was in 2014. So I just lost my full-time job. So I was trying to keep myself happy. I said, you know what, now I'm gonna have all the time in the world to read my stack of books that I bought, and I never got the time to read. Because I was working, 16-hour days. It was very long shifts. I worked for a TV station. I also worked for an online news agency at one point. So I said, okay, time to rest. So after we were able to set up our apartment in KL, I felt na, okay, no more deliveries to deal with, no more, and I said, okay, I'm bored. Because I explored na rin our area, because I would normally take walks, I try to familiarize myself with the area. So, of course, if there are delegations or if there is an event that the embassy needs to host and they ask me for a recommendation, I have something to say. Diba? Kasi yun, that's another role pala na, that we can be helpful in. So since we don't work at the embassy full-time, wala kaming 9 to 5, we try to be familiar with the city and be more proactive when it comes to helping, only when asked, of course. So sometimes there's going to be a delegation that's coming in and then they need a venue for an event or a dinner. Then you have something to recommend.
Okay.
Yeah, so sorry, where was I? Nakalimutan ko.
Why you started?
Why I started, okay. So, I got bored. Na parang, oh no, what am I gonna do? And at that time, I wasn't freelancing as a journalist yet because I didn't think that far ahead. I thought I'd be like, okay, I'll just read and then I'll probably write a book. Because I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a novelist when I was a child too. So sabi ko, okay, maybe it's my chance. It wasn't working out. So, I said, you know what, okay, let's try. And actually, before I left, I started and I put up the blog already, but it was more of like, I just wanted to share things that I'm learning along the way. I didn't want to take it seriously. It was more of like my diary that I can read when I'm, when I'm 80 or something and look back where we were, what I did. So it was it was a personal thing lang. So, and I would talk about things that I learned also. And then suddenly, I started having brands send me stuff in Kuala Lumpur.
Wow.
They were like, oh, can you talk about this? And then it became a little bit more into beauty and like lifestyle because I love eating out. I love beauty stuff. I love fashion also. So it became that thing, and then it just kept evolving.
Right.
And then I just woke up one day and I was surprised because then there would be people messaging me, like asking me for advice. Because, oh, we're going on our first posting. And I'm always like, I'm also on my first posting. So, because sometimes you try to find resources about it, and there were hardly any when I started in 2014.
Okay.
I remember there was this book called Diplomatic Baggage by one of my favorite writers. So her name's Bridget Keenan. She's a diplomatic spouse. And she wrote that book about her adventures as a diplomatic spouse. They were posted in Kazakhstan, they were in Syria before the war, they were in Africa also, she was in Nepal at some point. So she had like a very colorful life, and she wrote a book about it called Diplomatic Baggage. And for me, that was my Bible.
Yeah.
But it was more of like also comedy because there were things that were funny because let's say she was lost in translation, and this was the time when there was no Google. She's now in her late 80s, I think, or early 80s.
Wow, okay.
She's and she's still well, and I'm so happy that she is. I recently interviewed her.
Wow, that's so cool.
Via Zoom, and I have always wanted to meet her in person. So I interviewed her via Zoom, and then she republished. So the book has been republished recently, last year. So they had a new printing of the book, and in the foreword, she included my blog.
Oh,
And
wow,
that was
that's
such
so
a full circle moment because
Yeah.
she started it for everybody, like talking about this kind of life in a more candid way, not taking yourself too seriously, and just laughing at
Right.
herself. And that's something I really like because I'm also somebody who laughs at myself a lot. Na if I make a mistake, okay, you know how to pick yourself up from it, right? So it was the same with her, and I think a lot of the diplomatic spouses who are out there, like maybe right. I'm not the only one who blogs about diplomatic life, and
Right.
I know a lot of us were inspired by her. So yeah, that's how it started. I think I was also heavily inspired by that. If you read the blog, it's also medyo tongue-in-cheek. I make fun of myself, the things that I thought I knew but I didn't. But yeah, she's an inspiration for it, I must say. Yeah.
That's cool. What's her name? Bridget
Keenan.
Keenan.
Yeah.
Okay. Diplomatic baggage. If you guys are curious, wanting to be a diplomatic spouse, I don't know. Or wanting to know the life. Or wanting to know the life.
And she was a journalist also.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, still a journalist. She sometimes writes pa rin. So that's also where I got the idea na, maybe I can freelance.
Yeah.
So, very
There-
helpful to me.
There's a will, there's a way talaga.
Yeah.
You'll figure it out eventually. Now, you also discussed in a previous interview, like there's a discrepancy because once again, how we know diplomats from TV shows, from movies, and like what you mentioned, Carol, it's like they make it sound very exciting, diba? There's always like action happening in the world or something. So, like there's discrepancy you mentioned, like in the series, like The Diplomat, and then being a real life diplomat. So could you help shed light on what diplomats actually do on the regular?
Okay, so if you watch the show, most of the time you see the deputy ambassador acting like the fairy godmother of the ambassador. Like, he would come in with clothes. And all. It's not like that. The deputy ambassador has their own role at the embassy. They have their own portfolio. A lot of it is also meetings, long meetings for them, and then they report to their home offices. So if you're a German diplomat, then you report back to Germany. It's a lot of political reporting. You watch the news a lot where you are, you get a feel of the political scenario, and you try to report that back home because, of course, like these types of, so medyo parang spy because you get intelligence also. And then you make recommendations for the good of your relationship. So let's say, this party won, we have a connection from way before that they love the Philippines, then maybe we can work together in a better way, mga ganon. So it's building relationships. Yun talaga siya. They make it sound more exciting, diba? And they don't carry guns. Diba? Or the kidnapping, it happened before, but thankfully not as much now. There is diplomatic immunity, but of course it's there for a reason. If you are posted in a country that is medyo hostile against your country, you don't want that country shooting the messenger, which is you. Diba? So funny enough, the word for embassy in German is Botschaft, which means message. Diba? So, like in the movie 300, remember when Leonidas killed the messenger? It's like so wrong. That shouldn't happen because you don't. That guy was a diplomat.
You're right.
The guy he pushed in
emissary
that.
or something.
The emissary. That's like the precursor of a diplomat, right? So you don't shoot the messenger. So you're basically a messenger for your country to another country.
Interesting. Okay. And so, what does it take then for if there are monsters who are watching or listening on radio? What does it take for you to be a successful or an effective diplomat?
Speaking as a journalist who covers diplomats, even up to now, I find that you really have to be at a certain level a people person. You have to have good analytical skills. My husband, funny enough, is an introvert.
Really?
But he switches. He switches it on when he needs it, of course, for work. But yeah, you have to be a people person. You have to be parang journalist. You are very analytical. You like to listen to people also, and you're good with picking up certain types of information. Being a good writer helps because you will write a lot of reports. But yeah, I think those are very good traits. Being flexible also. I find that I've met a couple of people who had a hard time at their postings because they're not very flexible. They were used to how things were done in their country, and then when they moved to another country that did things differently, it made them frustrated. So I think an open mind, that's also very important. Because when you move, diba, you're not there to change things. You're not a citizen of that country where you're living in. You're not an immigrant there. You're there as a visitor. You're being hosted by their government. So it's not your place to say negative things, to complain, and to make people feel uncomfortable about how they do things. You're there as a fly on the wall, like how I was as a journalist. Like I was a fly on the wall reporting about diplomats, and now diplomats are also like flies on the wall in the country where they are. You know, watching, observing, learning, and then reporting back.
Gotcha. Okay. Be good observers and be people persons, not people pleasers.
People person. Mahirap yung people pleaser.
As a diplomat, especially.
Oh, and you have to read up a lot. Yeah, an interest in history, current affairs, that's very important. The ones that I interview normally are very well versed in of course, that's their jobs, right? But you talk about the country and they know so many things about a particular country, especially if they were posted there. This wide range of interests also. A lot of, because it's also good if you have your own hobbies or interests outside diplomacy, because then you can connect with people through that. Diba? So really well-rounded people, honestly. I interview ambassadors for my column, and when I ask them about their careers, diba, it's always so fascinating where they've been, the things that they experience. Because when you're there in that country, sometimes you don't know, diba, it's history na pala, like what's happening, and you only know na in hindsight, diba, there was an ambassador who was in a country where there was an uprising, and of course you know that it's going to be important in their history at some point, but when you're there at that moment, you're only thinking na, okay, how am I going to keep my family safe? But now in hindsight, that ambassador was saying na, yeah, that was a very interesting time in our life. Like, of course we were scared, but that was history happening and we were right there.
Gosh, I mean, but it's fascinating then, like to meet these people of the world, basically, because of the knowledge that they have, and then also of, you know, just to build that relationship with our country, with theirs also. I think it's just a really fascinating. It's a fascinating profession for those who might be interested in foreign affairs, I guess. So now we know what it's like to be a diplomat now. So for us to be almost diplomatic in certain life situations, I'm going to ask Carol, how do we respond? How do we react in certain situations? So the first one, let's say, for example, Carol, we got you're dining at a restaurant, but they got your order wrong. So like, especially for someone, whether you're outspoken and you don't mind like calling it out, or if you're again like a people pleaser and you're like, no, it's fine. What would be the best way to resolve this issue?
I think in this day and age, no, I mean, it's also sad for you if you're paying for a meal and you didn't really want that anyway. So of course you have to call the attention of the server, but don't make a fuss, diba? If it were me, I'll try to do it as quietly as possible. I'll probably try to catch their attention, and then when they come, I'd say na, oh, I actually ordered something else, or can you double check? Because it's also possible that maybe I was wrong. Maybe I said something else.
That's good.
Diba? So I think it's safe to always not assume or not to put blame on someone right away. So I would say, no, I'm so sorry. I think I ordered something else. Can you double check your records? Or if maybe there was a mishap in the kitchen. And yeah, normally they'll be more than willing to correct that naman. And if not, that's something that you can settle naman amicably.
Yeah.
Diba? So, but restaurants, in my experience, have always been very gracious about it. There has been a time when my order was wrong, and I've done that, and okay naman. Lumabas din agad yung order ko, and it was the right order na. And I said, thank you so much for correcting that.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned, I like that you included like the phrase, can you double check?
Yeah.
Because often like I would say, like I ordered something different, but I never really thought about like adding, can you double check maybe I mentioned another dish or something, because it's like you had a particular dish in mind or whatever order it was, but then who knows, baka ikaw yung nagkamali.
Yeah.
So it's that's actually a really interesting addition to like to what's this, to mentioning or calling out that, you know, you got the wrong meal or you got the wrong drink or whatever it is that you ordered. Okay, so next, a coworker keeps giving you unsolicited advice on how to do your job. So how can you bring this up, or how can you respond when it happens again?
Okay. I'd say thank you for looking out for me. However, I'm perfectly comfortable trying it my way first. But if it doesn't work, I'll get back to you.
Okay. All right.
I think it's always important to also acknowledge that we don't know everything. If we're coming from a place na, you know, you're humble, you're confident enough with your work or with what you know, but also at the same time humble enough to know that you don't know everything, then you keep everybody comfortable. Because the last thing you want, even with the situation with the server, is like laying blame on someone right away. Because then it makes them defensive. And once the other person is already defensive, you won't reach like a good way of communicating anymore.
Yeah. That's a good way of saying it. That's, again, very diplomatic way of actually responding to it. Exactly what we're looking for this evening.
Yeah. Hopefully I can always do that. There were times when I'm like, ayoko. There have been times. I mean, when I was working for TV, there were times also when I would be argumentative with my desk editor. Like, no, I want to do it this way. And based on experience, it never worked in my favor. And you're just starting like to have negative feelings with your coworker, and then with you, na parang you become difficult. Doesn't even matter like what sex or gender the person is, but if you're difficult as a person, if you're difficult katrabaho, you're just difficult katrabaho.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you get that image. So I try to balance lang. But I want to make sure that I do my thing, and but at the same time I don't want to offend people also.
Okay. And like, so has this happened with you as like a diplomatic spouse? Na parang maybe someone gave you unsolicited advice and you had to bite your tongue maybe because you probably wanted to say something else.
Oh yeah, a lot of times.
My gosh.
Because when you're trying to build relationships with people, right? Na medyo personal, of course, people tend to ask you about your personal life. We don't have kids, my husband and me. I'm at a child-free I'm at the point in my life wherein I feel like I want to be child-free forever. Of course, I'm not gonna say, oh, my mind will never change, because I could wake up at 55 and say I want kids now, but that's on me, right? But right now, I'm in a mind space that child-free, and I kind of have strong convictions on that. However, there will be people who will say na, mag-anak ka na, sayang naman.
True.
And I'm like, sometimes it gets too much. And normally, because I brush it off, I'll be like, so I just say na, I'll think about it, or I'll say na, right now it's a no, or if I'm feeling very strong that day, or like my convictions are really strong, I say na, it's not for me. Because if I change my mind later, I don't really have to answer to them. No?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
It's really on me. So I just say it nicely, or if they keep making kulit, I say na, oh, can we change the topic? Because I think that's really personal. And that makes them awkward.
Yeah. That's
Kasi-
cool. And it sets the boundary
Oo,
also.
it's very personal. So I'll say na I don't want kids, and if they keep making kulit, it's really personal. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah, and I think that's something, I think that kind of line is hard for Filipinos to get around because we're kind of like, we don't want to seem like we're insulting somebody, and that can come off as something that's like, someone might get offended by it.
Yeah.
Diba? So,
Someone was doing that recently. I was in a conversation with a couple of other people, and that was brought up. And that person didn't know that the other lady in our group was trying to have children and was having a hard time. So what I did after the conversation is I pulled the lady aside and I said, maybe we should be a bit more careful because we don't know if somebody in the group is struggling. I didn't say who it is, and I didn't say that there really was someone. I just said like, I'm worried that there might be someone. I mean, with me it's fine because I'm adamant about it's my choice, but if let's say somebody in the group is having a hard time, it might not be a good idea to keep bringing this up.
yeah. That's such a classy way also of not, of not pinpointing someone else in the circle now who's struggling or like, dropping that gossip on someone.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to put somebody on the spot also.
Yeah.
So I don't say if there's actually someone. It's just like, I'm worried that there might be someone.
That's a good way of
That's a good
putting
way
it.
I feel like it's better rather than, kasi it might pique their interest.
Yes,
Parang,
we
so
know.
who?
Yeah.
I don't want to lie naman. So I'm like, okay, let's keep it vague.
Yeah, I love that. Keep things vague. Well, if you can, if the situation calls for it.
Wag nang too much detail.
Yeah. So how about when you are talking with a coworker, with a friend or something, but they keep interjecting you, like to kind of drive a point or something. Not necessarily to argue, but it's like, those people who like to talk louder. How do we interject someone who's talking over us? Like when we're not even done talking yet.
I go quiet.
Okay, go quiet.
Because it happened na before to me a couple of times. There was a particular person who liked to do this, not just with me, but like with everybody else. We were at the reception, we were at the diplomatic reception, and this person kept trying to talk over everyone. So they will hog the spotlight, and so I just kept quiet. And I waited for somebody to either. I waited for somebody to talk also, but she will do it then to the other person. So I kept quiet, and then when there was a break, when finally she was finished, I said, "Oh, can I go back to what I was saying earlier? I was interrupted," and then I would say what was left for me to say. But kasi I don't want to turn it into a fight. Na parang wait, let me finish, diba? Or if I cut the person, then mas manggigigil sila, diba, na, hindi, ako din. I need to get the spotlight back. So let them finish. If they don't, well, that's really sad. But they will at some point. They'll get tired because they'll realize na, wait, wala na sumasagot sa akin. Or wala na nagre-react. There was a time when the same person kept doing it again, and naturally, for the conversation shifted na, kasi we were in a big group, and of course, these kinds of people, they like an audience.
Yes.
And then what happened was we started, parang nag-break apart kami into smaller groups. And it happened naturally.
Yeah.
Nobody planned it. It's not like we were talking, ay nako, she's doing this na naman. Walang ganon. It's just that it happened naturally because the conversation got boring because it was so one way. So trust in the room, the vibe of the room.
Yeah.
Because if someone cannot read the room, people will gravitate towards others who can. And who can carry a better conversation and would also listen to you. Because you also meet people who are like listening to you for the sake na may maisugot sila.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult conversation. So, I also try to, or if dalawa lang kami, and parang I choose my battles. So I really need to interject ulit. And
Right.
I'm gonna get a drink.
Yeah.
Ganon. And then I move. And then I move on. Kasi sometimes there's just no cure. Kapag ganun yung
Just
kausap
take
mo.
yourself out of the situation.
Especially if it's a
na lang.
social situation. But if it's work, I'd say if you are in a meeting, somebody's trying to do that to you, keep talking over you, stay quiet, and then find another opening in the conversation, and then go back to that. And then if you keep doing that, the other people will realize that person just keeps on interjecting. Kasi
Gotcha.
you can say na, oh, I'm gonna go back to what I was supposed to say earlier. Oh, can I finish what I was saying earlier?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. As long as you get back to your point, that's the important part.
Just don't forget. Because sometimes it's hard no, when it's a conversation and then you forget na what you were talking about. Yeah.
And okay, so what about how do we be almost diplomatic when someone gives you a backhanded comment or like makes a rude comment about you, so or maybe just like blatantly insults you in front of your face? Like how do you not fight back?
Grabe, ayan, work in progress din ako siya. Honestly, kasi my face is so transparent.
Oh, no.
That's something I'm working on. Trying to be more yung one poker face. I'm trying to get
Mahirap
there.
yun.
Mahirap
Oo.
siya. But when so far nobody has insulted me directly and in person. I feel like my friends say na I'm still I have a very intimidating face. So baka natatakot yung mga tao. But there have been backhanded comments. And so far, the best advice I'd say is wag patulan. Never. Because the moment na you patol, the moment na you lose your chill, the moment na you're the one who gets angry first, that ikaw yung masama. Even though that person was the one who started it. But if you patol, because it says more, like that kind of behavior, other people will pick up on that. And so you just let them do that on their own. Huwag kang papatol ever. Online, it's a little bit difficult. Sometimes you get people who are just commenting for the sake of commenting.
True.
I always try to same with the server, na, I might make my own mistakes also. Yeah. I was telling you earlier, there was a comment on how I say a certain word. And I was very confident on that pronunciation because people from that country taught me how to say the word. But then somebody says, oh, mali, mali. And that person is not from that country. So, bakit ako ma-offend when I'm sure you don't know better than the people who taught me? However, so I just replied, oh, but that's how I was taught, but maybe you know better. So, my gosh, okay, that's also backhanded if you think about it.
Slightly.
Yeah. But yeah, sometimes you also have to answer, but never ever in an angry way.
Yeah.
Never lose your temper, especially in public, because it's gonna say more about your demeanor, your upbringing, and just let them be rude. And if you look unfazed, if you are actually unfazed, then people will respect you more.
Ah,
Yeah.
all right. Be
Smile.
unfazed.
Or say, okay.
Okay, thanks for your feedback.
They say 2 + 2 is 5, okay. Yeah, okay lang.
Ay, nako. Well, I mean, people talaga. Some people are just very interesting to meet. Well, okay, so how do you engage naman in a heated discussion without you having to sound heated? And I know this is another challenge because sometimes, they will push the wrong buttons, diba? So how do you stay unfazed in an argument in which you are involved in?
Well, okay, I'm still waiting for a time wherein I would be, as in yung unfazed na ako,
Yeah,
for real.
yeah.
But my is fake it till you make it.
It's a good start.
Yeah, it's a good start. Diba? Just fake it till you make it na you are not, I just keep thinking na I'm not gonna patol or listen to what they have to say, and if they won't let you interject, then just let them talk and then ask them, oh, is it my turn to talk? Can I tell my side of the story also? I've tried doing this kind of discussion with someone before. They had an issue and then that was brought to the table, and I tried to do it as calmly as possible. For some reason, it annoyed them more. Kasi hindi ka pumapatol eh. They're not getting the reaction they want from you. So sometimes you win by not doing anything like that, diba? Without getting into the argument. So just say your piece calmly, and then if it's something that you still won't agree on, then you can just agree to disagree on this thing.
Yeah.
People are free to live the way they want. It's a free country. Diba? And you can live the way you want, I can live the way I want. You don't have to give up your side in order to finish an argument. It can be naman na nobody gives up their side. So it was a great discussion. Say, I learned something new about you today, and that's something I'll keep in mind also. Agree to disagree.
I can imagine for me that's gonna be like that's a tough, steep climb.
Yeah. Even for me, there are times parang talaga na I get so heated, and like you could see it in my face. I'm trying not to say anything, and my husband knows my cues, and he's like, "Okay, uwi na tayo." So it's hard because we're human, eh. I'm not gonna sit here and say, "Oh my God, I'm so perfect, I can do it." But it's not. We're human. It can, especially if it's someone who really knows how to push your buttons. Yeah. We fake it till we make it.
I think that's a good takeaway for this evening. I think.
So,
well, I mean, before we end, just a couple more questions. You mentioned about networking. You also have like the diplomatic spouses. They're having your own social group so that you can build those relationships. So when people are networking, then how do we interact? And you touched on this a little bit about like small talk, because it being an art form. So how can we approach networking without really hard selling why or what we're networking for?
Yeah, I'm so passionate about this. I really really love because it's something that you do even on a normal day, diba? Or you meet your colleagues, or if you are in a social event but with people from work, diba? It's also something that you can apply. But yeah, so start with small talk, definitely. But I think a lot of people kasi networking becomes cringy when somebody is just so eager to sell themselves. So parang my first advice is relax lang. Relax. So try to talk about yourself, but always remember to ask about the other person also. That will help you build rapport. Because if you're only parang nag-elevator pitch to the person, especially if it's a person who gets these kinds of things all the time, then you want to be memorable enough by being that person who's also interested in them. And not in a creepy way, diba? Na parang, how many kids do you have? Ganyan, diba? Or, kasi normally people ask that even in a networking setting, that shouldn't be the case. Nothing too personal dapat, but also like, kami, when we're posted abroad, we're like, so, which country are you from? And because it's, of course, you're in that situation na iba-iba kayo ng countries, right? So yeah, which country are you from? Or parang also, how are you finding your posting so far? So yeah, that's like small talk, like really easing into it. And then you don't have to finish your elevator pitch right then and there. I'd say give a teaser, make people interested, then exchange contacts. And then you keep in touch. So maybe the next day, you send a nice email na it was great meeting you. I hope that we could keep in touch. Kasi some people, they think na, nag-elevator pitch na ako, I gave my card, and then that person will call me, and then they never do. Because there's nothing in it for them din naman. Let's say if your pitch is not good enough for them, diba? But maybe the next year you have another pitch and you can work with that person. It's good to keep in touch. And that's the point of networking talaga. You don't get business deals done right there. You build your relationship and you build rapport. Not naman to be user, diba? But you want to have like a certain relationship with the person na yung may authentic friendship also. Kasi that's what makes it so cringy when somebody's just elevator pitching you and then they're not interested in you at all, and they just want to work with you.
User-friendly lang sila.
Doon mo na-feel na user-friendly. So try to be interested in others also. Diba? Not just yourself. Diba? So two-way conversation.
Gotcha. And our last question for how to be almost diplomatic is you made a post about this, how to sound polished and professional. So what are some tips on how to achieve this, if like in any setting, I guess, so that we don't offend anybody, so that people can take us more seriously. So what are some ways that we can do that?
So honestly, when I get excited, and I'm very open about this, my voice gets so high-pitched. And sadly, a lot of people don't see that as a very professional way of talking. And fully understandable because we have an idea of how a polished person sounds. So I'm not saying that it should be super deep, but you have to have a modulated voice and try to keep it at that kasi para it's more pleasant. I mean, I know that when I get so excited and it's so high-pitched, masakit siya sa tenga. Even my husband says it, so sabi ko, okay, gets. My mom says it, and that's my mom. So I try to keep it under control. Try to manage your emotions also, especially when talking about, let's say, something you are passionate about. Let's say you're pitching something or you're networking, diba? Minsan na, excite ka na, so then it gets too emotional. So there's that. Try to avoid filler words. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I sometimes still have filler words myself. And then try not to have that vocal fry, diba? The ones that became super popular on mainstream media, diba? Like, oh my God. That's an instant way for people to think na, not to take this person seriously, ganyan, kasi like it sounds just maarte. So try to have a more leveled voice and have a better posture also. Kasi when you're communicating with someone, it's not just the pitch, right? Not just the sound, and it's also how you carry yourself.
Right.
So carry yourself well, and also know what your material is. So if you are pitching about yourself, make sure na you know yung material mo. You know yourself well. And if you're pitching about your business or what you do, then have something ready to say about it. If you are going to a networking event or if somebody is hosting an event, know your hosts, diba? Because that could be a good point of small talk. You're like, oh, so how do you know the host? Diba? Oh, I know her from way before. She was my high school friend. So diba, that's a good way to start a conversation.
True.
Yeah, dress well, dress the part. Diba? Dress as the person that you want to be. Dress for the job you want. Diba? Like, always make sure your clothes are ironed para you look polished, you look professional. And yeah, good grooming, definitely. And that adds to your confidence. Because they all tie together. Na if you're confident, then you are confident enough to talk to people. Hindi ka stressed, hindi ka agitated, hindi siya lalabas sa voice mo. So try to work on your confidence, and that also starts with, syempre, diba? If you feel good, not saying we should all look like a Miss Universe, diba? But yung proper grooming, and then you feel confident, you feel good about yourself, you smell great, diba? Kasi then it's awkward if you know na, oh no, I didn't eat, my breath must be clammy. So, diba, prepare well for these sorts of events.
All right, there we go. In our pursuit of being almost diplomatic, thank you very much, Carol, for imparting your knowledge and also your experience as a diplomatic spouse. So it's been fun having you on the show. And where can Monsters find you also if they want to find out more, or like how to be classy, I guess, because you have those keep it classy segments. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm at Almost Diplomatic on Instagram and on any other social media. It's at Almost Diplomatic. I write the diplomatic column for the Manila Bulletin, and I freelance for a couple of other titles. I normally announce it on my social media if I have a new article out. I'm also on YouTube. I might try to revive that soon enough. But yeah, so far I think Instagram is the easiest. I'm even on TikTok, but I don't dance. I will spare you guys from that. And yeah, I do make these videos called Keep It Classy. Thanks for bringing it up. It's just my way of sharing the stuff that I learned in a tongue-in-cheek way. And also, hopefully it's still fun and that people can pick up something from it. Because I feel like some of the things that I learn are not just applicable for diplomats or diplomatic spouses, but like for everyday life. I feel like after I decided to, like I woke up one day and I decided I'm gonna be that woman. Now I'm gonna improve myself. I'm gonna be a better representative of the country, especially if I'm out with my husband. Then, then it started getting better for me. People take me seriously. People have more interest because then you dress the part, you carry what you want to be and what you want to do. I think it follows parang manifestation. Diba?
Yeah,
So,
that's
I
so
wanted to be
true.
more graceful. I'm not a very graceful kid. I didn't grow up graceful. I can't dance. I took up Pilates. I went to One Life, started stretching, and I feel like I have better posture. And I'm more flexible, I have more balance, and then I carry myself well. Because before that was my problem, like, oh, I'm slouching. So I
Yeah.
worked on that. Yeah, because I was having back pain.
Okay.
Not before, when I was young, I had good posture. Then, entering your 30s, biglang, oh, what's happening?
Yeah, yeah,
So I
you start
needed
to feel
straighten
it.
Yeah. So, you work on yourself. And it's actually a very good journey to have.
Yeah.
Like, it's also a self-love thing. If you had things that you didn't like about yourself before, know that you can always reinvent yourself for the better, hopefully. And it's something that you can do at any age. And yeah, if you want to improve your life, it all starts with you.
Yeah, definitely. And I was just about to ask if there was a takeaway, and she got there. She got there all on her own. So that's what we got for Heard on Thursdays. Thank you very much, Carol, once again for joining me
Thank you for
this
having
evening.
me, Nikki. Thank you. I enjoyed so much.
Well, don't forget to follow us on our socials. It is the Monster anniversary month after all, so do keep it locked for more events. Tomorrow's our party as well. So for now, keep it locked only here on the Monster. Bye-bye.
Monster exclusive interview. Monster exclusive interview. Only from Manila's hottest. Monster RX 93.1.